So for about 3 years I've been making homemade pizzas, but trying to find a good base, a pizza base that we like it in our family has been difficult. So after about 3 years of mixing and matching different recipes, I finally came up with this one that works perfectly for us. It's got the right consistency of thickness to firmness for the type of pizza that we like. So without further ado, let me tell you how I make it. First of all, sorry for the American measurements. So 2 cups or 250 ml per cup of 00 flour, which is actually pasta flour, sometimes known as pasta flour. And then I'm going to use half a cup of semolina, fine semolina, and unfortunately I cut the wrong end of the bag, which will drive Tina nuts. I'll probably do it subconsciously just to annoy her. So that'd be 125 ml, 125 gram of fine semolina, and that goes into my ancient old machine, which is just a mixing machine with a blade in the bottom. I've probably had that machine for 40 years. It was a wedding present. So the next thing that goes in is salt, which I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of salt. Now that sounds like an awful lot, but for my flavour, that's what we like. And I'll also talk to you about the amount of yeast I put in a minute and why I put so much yeast in, because of the salt. So the next ingredient that goes in is just ordinary caster sugar, 2 teaspoonfuls of that. And so the next bit is going to be a bit controversial, because I actually use a full packet of dried yeast, which is about 7 grams, and I mix that sort of onto the side with semolina to keep it away from the salt, because from what I understand of the chemistry, that the salt and the yeast don't mix. It seems like quite a lot of yeast, but it works well for us, as you'll see. So that's all in the machine. All the dried ingredients are in that machine, and we'll just give it a quick whiz. So once I've finished with all the dry ingredients mixing up, I'm going to add, while the machine's running, 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Now that blade in the dry ingredients can produce a lot of heat, so I use cold water from the fridge. So the recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of water, or 178 ml, but of course with all baking things these measurements are not exact. So while the machine's running, I'm going to add these 3/4 of a cup of water, this cold water out of the fridge. But I've got to wait till the consistency's right. So in goes that extra 1/4 of a cup to make it up to the right amount of water. But as you can see, it's beginning to sort of clump into a dough, but not really enough, and that's not what I want. I want it to be a bit more than that, so probably need to add a bit more water. I'll just check it. Oh yeah, it's still dry, still too dry. So let's put a little bit more water in. That's more like it. As you can see, it's starting to clump together. I also have a recipe where I make some Parmesan biscuits using the exact same technique in terms of getting the consistency of this dough. And this is just how I want it. Let's just put a little bit more in. There we go. Perfect, that's just what I want, and I like that ball to build up there. Right, that's ready for the next stage. So that looks just about right. So a bit of flour on the board, so I can now take my dough and give it a bit of kneading. I've got a bread making machine which would do all this, but this is just so much more satisfying. Now, when it comes to kneading dough, you can't teach this stuff. It's just experience and practice, but it starts to feel sort of, well, doughy. And I'll just keep going till it feels right. That's the only thing I can explain about kneading dough. So my dough's all ready, so I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of olive oil in the bottom of this bowl, just so that the dough doesn't stick in it when I want to take it out, because this now will go into cling film and then go into a warm room. And what do they say? Let the dough rise till it's about double. Well, we just leave it a couple of hours, and when it's ready, it's ready. So it's been about 2 hours, maybe 3, and so I'm going to take my dough out. Okay, well, it's not coming out as easy as it should have done, but there we go. And we're back to this kneading thing. It's a matter of experience, I guess. But just keep going until, it's knocked back, as they call it. So time to prepare my board for the first part of the pizza construction. Just knocking it back a little bit. It felt a little bit wet, that's why I'm actually soaking up some of this flour, but it's pretty much perfect now that that flour's with it. So I'm making 2 pizza bases here, so I've just weighed that on my scales, and I'm going to chop that in half to end up with 2 little balls that I can then make into my 2 pizza bases. So I'll use my pastry blade and just check that I've got 2 similar sized pieces of dough ready to scrunch it on the board into the start of the 2 shapes that I require. My first ball is all ready to go, so I'll just give it a little more of that kneading just to get a nice shape. And now it's time just by hand to start making the first pizza base. I'm just basically making it into like a big circle of dough. Now, if you were Italian or worked in a pizza shop, you'd now be spinning this round your head to stretch out that dough. And so I do it on the board like this, and then once I've got about half pizza size, I'm going to transfer it onto my baking tray. There we go. Now, I use this roller, which I find is absolutely great for doing this type of work. When I used to use a bigger roller, it was always sticking to it, and I could never get the consistency. If I do it by hand, I couldn't. But this way, it just enables you to get a totally even pizza right out to the side of your baking tray, all ready to go into the oven. But if you really wanted to, you could always do this on the board and make a rustic pizza that you could use your paddle and stick it into your pizza oven. But these trays that I use here are good for sort of like a domestic home oven. That's why we use them. And they release fairly easily. I prefer these flat ones to the ones with little holes you can get in, because sometimes the dough squishes into the holes and they're difficult to release. But these are great for the oven we use. I do want to buy a pizza oven this summer, but for now we'll just continue using these. So that's it, the pizza's all out to the edges, and as you can see it doesn't sort of shrink back, which is great. So I'm not going to bore you with the second one, that one's all ready. The next part is a little bit unusual, but we actually quite like a crispy base, so we shove ours in the oven for a couple of minutes just to firm that dough up. As you can see, it's risen a little bit, but this way it gives us a really crispy base. I know it's bad we're using commercial pizza sauce. I don't actually like it as good as mine, but if you're interested, I could post another video about how I make my sauce as well. Again, another recipe that's taken forever. If you're interested, why not leave a comment down in the comment section, and I'll see if you're interested in that, and also the Parmesan biscuits if you're interested. But let me know. We cook our pizza for about 10 minutes at 180 in a fan oven, but every oven's different, so you just do what you need. And there we have that beautiful pizza all ready to eat. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, I'm sure you know what to do down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye for now.